what's up? KillJoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Today we're going to be doing a review of Edgar Wright's new film, Last Night in Soho, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Thomasin McKenzie. We're gonna get into all this in just a second here, but first I'm gonna need y'all to like this video and subscribe for more horror content. Also, please consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see more videos like this. I'm about to announce a whole bunch of exclusive content only going to my Patreon page, so if you want to check that out, make sure to support me on Patreon. The link for that will be in the description below. Alrighty, now let's get into it.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Well, I'm Pennywise, the dancing clown.
Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast!
You son of a...
God, don't do that.
Well, sometimes that is better.
To do a very quick non-spoiler review of Last Night in Soho, I have a lot of thoughts on this film. Not all good, not all bad. This was definitely not the film I was expecting. They marketed this movie as a deep psychological horror thriller and Edgar Wright's return to horror and all that, and it wasn't quite that. It's much more of a, besides one thing which I'll talk about later when I get into spoilers, there's one specific thing that kind of makes this thing like R-rated or whatever, but besides that, it's pretty much just like your PG-13 like mystery movie. It feels like they should have marketed this film more towards like teens instead of just straight up adults and saying that this is like a new psychological thriller, because it's really not. It's barely a horror film. Like I said, there is one little aspect of this thing that just makes it a horror film, which it really makes this film tough to market to a certain like demographic, which I totally understand why they had to market it the way they did. This is it's a weird movie. It's tough. It doesn't really fit in one genre or the other. It does a lot of really cool, like visually stunning things, but there's not a whole lot of substance. It's very giallo, and what I mean by that, because we like to define that word in so many different ways. If it's talking about the movie genre from the 70s, or if we're talking about the mystery novels that a lot of those Italian film directors from the 70s and like actually going on the 80s a little bit were inspired by. This feels much more like those novels. Like it feels, it's very much so a giallo mystery more than anything. But the downfall of this movie is that its plot is almost that of a Goosebumps book. Like it's not bad, but it's not horror enough to be like super scary and in your face. This might scare like a child, like baby Jake was terrified of Monsterland as a kid, but now I go back and watch that stuff and you can see it's like kind of cheesy and it's like, it's fun. It's still good, but it's just not what I was expecting. With that being said though, Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, and honestly everyone in this movie, gives a wonderful performance. I saw Thomasin McKenzie in Jojo Rabbit. I thought she did a really great job in that film, and I'm so glad that she has another movie where she's the lead actress, because she's fantastic and I feel like she's not getting enough credit. Everyone is going to this movie for Anya Taylor-Joy, and she's fantastic, of course. She's one of my favorite actresses in Hollywood, if not my favorite. But I do want to point out Thomasin McKenzie is also phenomenal, and make sure to give her credit, because she's the actual like leading role of this film. She does a great job. I can't wait to see her in more horror films, hopefully. I would love to see Thomasin McKenzie in like a straight up psychological horror thriller, like something from A24 where it's like it gets deep into some dark shit. That would be great. I would not be opposed to that whatsoever. We've already seen Anya Taylor-Joy in The Witch, which was phenomenal, from 2016, and Robert Eggers' directorial debut. If you haven't seen that or The Lighthouse yet, I highly recommend. Both of them delve into these weird regions of horror that are just, it's so interesting to me. They're both period pieces that like dive into some like just really weird commentary. Definitely make sure to check both of those out. I do want to reiterate though that stylistically this movie looks gorgeous. There are some sequences throughout this film that are just like something straight out of like a painting from like the 1700s or some shit. Like it looks gorgeous. It's a love letter to like 60s London and like the nightlife of that. And it really is a wonderful film. I just feel like it's not the psychological horror film that they were trying to advertise it as. There's not really much more I can say without spoiling stuff, because I really want to talk about the mystery aspect that I also really liked, but I just can't really talk about that without spoiling it. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, go check it out in theaters now and then come back to this video. We'll talk some spoilers. So getting into some of these spoilers, I really loved the twist ending. I think that was one of the strongest parts of the entire movie. I honestly didn't see it coming. But if you think about it, there's a massive plot hole there that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Our main character Eloise can see ghosts and can see stuff that actually happened in the past. So why did she see the dude murdering Anya Taylor-Joy's character Sandy when that wasn't actually the case? It was the other way around. Why would she have seen that vision if that wasn't the case? Especially if it's the ghosts of all these dead like businessmen trying to like tell her like, hey, we got murdered. Why would they be telling her the wrong thing? It makes no sense to me. There was no implication within this entire film that maybe like Sandy or Alexandria, who's still alive, was like influencing her visions or knew that she could like see ghosts. There's none of that whatsoever. Maybe there's a deleted scene or something that they cut out of this movie that was really important to that, but overall, if you think about it, the whole twist makes no sense whatsoever. It's a massive and glaring plot hole that just does not work for me whatsoever. And it's shocking because this is Edgar Wright, who, if you don't know anything about him, his filmography is phenomenal. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. I think Shaun of the Dead is the best horror comedy ever made. I love it. I watch it like every other couple of months or so. Like I said, stylistically, you have Edgar Wright at his most creative and insane with the cinematography. In Shaun of the Dead, for example, he does so much with cinematography and like things in the background or these like zoom in shots that tell so much story about like when they're getting beer at the pub. Like it's just these really fast zoom ins on like the beer in the glass and all that. It's so cool. It tells so much story in such a quick and fast way. But the plot overall just is overcooked, I think is the best way to describe it. It feels like he thought about it way too much and tried to compact this like crazy mystery all into this one thing that just doesn't work. It definitely feels like his take on Carrie mixed with like a giallo murder mystery novel. And it's a really cool concept. Like I love murder mystery. I love the idea of like just a young woman coming into her prime and like having like supernatural powers. That's really cool. You mix both those things together, awesome. But what doesn't work about this is not the execution, because I think it was executed really well. It's the writing at the source. The script for this movie is based off of a story idea written by Edgar Wright, but like it's also written by someone else who I don't want to dog on, because like I hate talking trash about people, especially people who make movies, because they put their all into their films, and when it doesn't come out the right way, I want to comment on it and be honest, but I also don't want to just say like, oh, this movie's trash, because it's not. It's a really cool movie. It's just, it doesn't, like the plot and the twist just doesn't work for me when you really think about it. There's also something about multiple people writing a script. Typically when it's like one or two people, it's like, okay, it could still come out okay, but this film feels like it's a lot of ideas trying to like clash and be put together at some point. Sometimes it works, but then there's other times where it just doesn't. For like the ending, for example. The twist ending feels like you had two different ideas that were gonna like converge at the end, but they don't mix very well. I feel the same way about the latest Candyman that just came out. It's a really good movie, but it's like three different movies in one because it was written by three different people. And it feels like they all had a different idea of what to do with a new installment of Candyman, but they just didn't get it all together to mix correctly. The only thing that barely clears this film as a psychological horror film, because it's really not that scary. It's much more of a murder mystery. You could have taken this element out, and then just marketed it to teens. I feel like would have been the better way to do this. But there's a sequence where Thomasin McKenzie's character is having a dream about Sandy, and she sees that unfortunately Sandy became a prostitute when like working out in show business just didn't work. And we see all these sequences of like the businessmen in London basically like raping these girls, which sucks. But I almost feel like you could have left that out. Like there's two things that this movie should have done. You should have either expanded on that and made this film even darker, or completely taken it out and then just like marketed it to teens as like a murder mystery film, which would have been fine. I think it would have been really cool if they would have went one direction or the other, but it's like in this like middle ground somewhere where it's not quite one thing or the other. With very ambitious films like this, you're gonna get this sometimes, unfortunately, even from the best of directors. This is a hard movie to make and market. So that's why I don't want to just dog on this film and say it's trash. Like I have no problem saying The Forever Purge is absolutely terrible, because it is, and you could have made a better Purge movie, for real. But although I feel like this movie misses with its writing, it does a lot of really interesting things that I've never quite seen done with film before. This might be one that I need to do a rewatch on, because like I remember the first time I watched Videodrome, I didn't like it at all. Like I absolutely hated Videodrome the first time I watched it. Now it's probably my favorite Cronenberg film. Like I respect the hell out of it. Even though it doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense, I think it's genius. I think it has some of the most crazy visuals in all of Cronenberg's movies, and even though it stars an absolutely crazy James Woods, I still really like it. I was really intrigued the whole way through too. Like there was not a single dull moment in this movie where I'm like, oh, I'm bored. No, you're never bored throughout this movie. It's very exciting. It's very different. I think that maybe this movie is just so new and I've never seen anything like it that I just don't really know how to judge it quite yet. Once again, I'd like to say that like just because there's a big plot, but just because I'm saying that there's a big plot hole in here, it doesn't mean that I don't like it. I love and respect Edgar Wright. The guy is one of the best filmmakers in the industry, in my opinion. I think in the past 20 years, the guy has made some of the better better movies out there, for sure, like Baby Driver, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, At World's End. I mean, I can go on. Scott Pilgrim. And after looking him up, I didn't know this, he co-wrote Ant-Man, which is like, what? No way! There's a reason I love that film so much, and now it makes sense. But I think as of right now, if I was to rank Edgar Wright's films, Last Night in Soho would probably be the one at the bottom. I do want to do a rewatch though and revisit this and maybe do another video sometime in the future, like when it comes out on Blu-ray. This is definitely what I'm going to buy. Right now I don't own any Edgar Wright films, which is a problem. I was just looking through my shelf and I'm like, I don't own any of his movies. So I'm gonna make it a point to buy all of his movies, rewatch all of them, and make like some kind of Edgar Wright listing video, because he's an incredible director. He hasn't made much, but what he has made is phenomenal. Everything is very notable. Even this film, which it might be my least favorite of all of his movies that he's directed, but it's still very notable and something that I feel like all horror fans should watch. What did you guys think of Last Night in Soho? Although it wasn't exactly what I was expecting, I still enjoyed a lot of things about this movie. Leave me a comment about it down below. Thank you all so much for watching my little review of Last Night in Soho. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, just look up KillJoy Jake and I'll come up. Please consider supporting me on Patreon as well. The link for that will be in the description below, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.